Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the second webinar on the Canadian hotel market in response to COVID-19. CFO Capital and Colliers Hotels have come together as an outlet for experts to participate and provide support, as well as offer strategies to one another during this pandemic. My name is Robin McCluskey, and I'm joined with Mark Kay as my co-moderator today. Being in hospitality, it's our DNA to connect with one another. So our intent with this webinar is to offer opportunities for you all to interface during this crisis. And hopefully by joining together on best practices and coping tools, it could help for a stronger response and recovery as one industry and one community. I see here we've reached our capacity of 1,000 people on the line right now. So thank you for joining us. It's a mix today here of hotel owners, operators, lenders, and other stakeholders who are all seeking solutions and grappling with challenges that we've never seen anything remotely close to. Since our first webinar just 16 days ago, the prognosis and outlook has clearly become even more somber. More than half of all hotels are closed right now across the country, according to the Hotel Association of Canada, and the industry has laid off 80% of its workforce, or about 250,000 jobs. The national hotel occupancy rate for the week of April 5th to April 11th was just 12%, according to STR, with RevPAR down 85% to just $12. I think everyone can admit it's difficult to forecast right now because the outcome depends not on economic trends, but on the behavior of this new and poorly understood virus. What we do know is that the travel and tourism industry is key to economic recovery across the country and the globe. So it's one that's being watched very closely by government as well as stakeholders. We are a resilient industry and have experience being on the front end of downturns before, so we will recover from this. It's going to just take some creativity and collaboration so that we can mitigate the impact here.
Thanks, Robin. Want to welcome our panelists. For them to pop on the screen. There they are. Hello, everyone. This week, we have 4 very exceptional hotel owner-operators who represent various regions in Canada. First, Mandy Farmer from Accent Inns and Hotel Z, a BC company that has been owned and operated by the Farmer family since 1986. Mandy took over the role of president and CEO of Accent Inns from her father, Terry Farmer, in 2008. With 8 locations in BC, they own, operate their assets with innovative operating styles and a real passion and focus on their employees. Next, Ryan Pomeroy. Give away, Ryan. CEO of Pomeroy Lodging, with over 20 hotels and resorts in Alberta, BC, and Alaska, with 2,000 employees. He brings focus and strategic thinking to his business. He's not only deeply connected to the regions they operate in, but is recognized across Canada. He believes that a fierce investment in people, properties, and communities where Pomeroy works is where he'll drive the success. Next, Bertrand Leboeuf, president and founder of Groupe DACA, a general contractor, developer, and operator of real estate projects in Quebec since 1979. They have developed and sold over 1,500 condo units, developed, owned, and operated 800 apartment units, and lastly, developed, owns over 1,000 rooms in Quebec, mainly Hilton and Marriott franchises in Montreal. Last but not least is Jeff Appleton. He's CEO of DP Murphy, who own and manage 13 hotels in Eastern Canada. Danny Murphy founded the company in 1980 with the opening of 2 Tim Horton restaurants. And today, in addition to their assets, they own and operate 60 restaurants under brands that include Tim Hortons, Wendy's, The Keg, and Boston Pizza. Before joining Danny, just over 3 years ago, Jeff had an extensive history in hospitality as a hotel developer, owner, and operator in both Canada and the USA. He reminded me yesterday that he was CEO at Dollar Rent-A-Car on 9/11 and has reflected the lessons learned during that time. Jeff, we're going to hold you to that. We're also thrilled to have Susie Grunau, who's an accomplished association executive with over 15 years of experience in managing complex industry issues and delivering successful political outcomes. Since 2016, she has been the president of the Hotel Association of Canada, which is the EPIC Center of Relief Programs, that have been announced by the federal government for the sector. Susie will share recent developments, highlighting what is available to hoteliers today and in the days to come. First, we'll begin with a regional check-in. Moving west to east, can you each take a few minutes to give your perspective in your respective regions of the country? How operationally are you protecting your businesses and employees through the crisis? We'll start with Mandy. Lay it on us.
Sure. Luckily, we are weathering this crisis fairly well. Right now, we have only 2 properties closed. So I still have 5 running and 1 under construction. Given all of our properties, even with the 2 that are closed, we're running around an average of about 50% occupancy. So that really helps me sleep better at night for sure. Right from the very beginning, I confess, I went down the rabbit hole and imagined the worst and thought, I want to come out of this with my reputation at stake because I might be knocking on some of your doors looking for a job. That focus on our reputation and really leading from our heart has first and foremost allowed us to focus on our employees and keeping them safe. So we established right from the beginning excellent protocols and procedures for keeping them safe. One of our managers she used to work on a hospital ward, and we were able to use her to implement absolutely amazing procedures. And from there, we were very comfortable in welcoming people into our hotels, knowing that they would be safe in our environment. I'm happy to share any of those procedures and protocols. I think that in this time of need, hotels actually can play a vital role in this crisis, whereby we can be a safe place for people to shelter and keep their families safe. So if you would like to receive any of those, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mandy. Ryan, what is your perspective?
Yeah, quickly. Thanks, Mark. You know, our hotels, we have a group of hotels in northeastern BC, northwestern Alberta, focus in a lot of secondary, tertiary oil and gas markets, sort of where the business started. We have a large resort in Kananaskis in the Alberta Rockies, and some properties in one in Kelowna, one in Prince George, so sort of more central and southern British Columbia. So it's a bit of a different story through the portfolio, but generally, you know, we've been dealing with it in the same way. I would say, you know, the way we did that is really by turning our executive team into a COVID task force. And we did that, you know, on March 9th. We saw our first case in Alberta on March 5th and determined, you know, this would be a serious thing. We didn't probably forecast as serious as it's become, but something that would really impact our business, you know, in the short or midterm. You know, fortunately, unfortunately, we went through pretty significant challenge in the global financial crisis, as many did. But much more recently for us in 2016, when the price of oil started falling, we went through a period that was, you know, twice as bad as the global financial crisis for us. So I feel we have a great team that's been through that. We have a lot of tools in the toolbox that we had to use. You know, it seems like just yesterday we were dealing with the crash of the Alberta economy, which really was just sort of crawling back to its knees. I wouldn't even say it was back on its feet when this hit. So we really split up the executive team. We started having calls daily for the first 2 weeks, I guess 3 weeks if you count that week of the March. Week of March 9th, we had calls every day with the executive team, just working through different things. Those calls sort of moved to 3 times a week, and now we're just doing them once a week. But we just basically all wore different hats. So we had members of the team focusing on cost reductions, you know, fixed cost reductions, working with our vendors to do that. Members of the team working on labor plans, you know, for all the different properties, which included a lot of layoffs in our case, and organizing that. People focusing on government aid. So there was someone just sort of monitoring that and sifting through the information. Customer communications, relationship management, liquidity planning, cash flow forecasting, and lender relationships is really what I've spent a lot of my time on. We had someone focused just on employee communication and getting stuff out, as much as we could. And then sort of last but not least, we had a few of our regional VPs that were really in charge of, company-wide, I'll say, in-property project management, whether that was shutting down properties, implementing new cleaning standards, new ways to provide breakfasts in the breakfast rooms, you name it. Things were changing dynamically, and we would sort of just report back in, daily and use the collective mind power to move forward. So, I think ultimately that team has sort of borne all the things that are allowing us to survive and to take care of our people. We've extended benefits for all of our people that are currently on temporary leave of absence. Anyone that lives in staff housing, we've continued to allow them to live there, rent-free, and to feed them where necessary. And, we'll continue to do that for the foreseeable future.
Thanks, Ryan. And then moving to the east in Quebec, Bertrand, what is your take?
Well, right now, of course, some of our hotels are closed, some are open. Main hotel closed are the one that cater to the tourist market. And we're looking for the business market. Of course, there's not a lot of business right now in Montreal, so the occupancy is extremely low. But we're trying to get some of the market, government market, medical market. We see that doctors, nurses, we have a market there, so they're coming to our hotels. We're looking at government market. I don't know if you're aware, but some CHSLD, which is the retirement home, some of them have problems, so we're looking into getting them into our hotels. So we're working hard on it, but still the occupancy is very, very low. We established protocol also for our guests to come in the hotel, such as all the hygiene that the government established and other hygiene and protocol for our guests to protect mainly our guests and also, very important, our employees. So we've done also cash flow analysis. Every time we decided to close a hotel, we did the cash flow analysis. And if we had a chance, especially before the government 75% government subsidy was in place, if we had a chance of keeping the hotel open, we did. So right now we're just ramping up in the difficult times, but it's looking good. It's looking good, and we feel that eventually, we're going to open and get stronger and be stronger after that episode.
Thank you, Bertrand. And now moving further east with Jeff Appleton.
Mark, I think is more of the same story from us. We were on it relatively quickly, somewhere in that 8th, 9th of March window. Quickly, while there's no playbook per se, there have been cues from big events that have happened in the past. And if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, it probably is. So we were relatively quick, even if it wasn't eloquent or precise. It hit 90% of the targets. We cut everything we could. We did everything we could with our properties that remained open, our staff, our guests, same as Ryan, Bertrand, and cleaning, new policies, procedures throughout the buildings. But it quickly became a winding down of 9 of our 13 properties. Understanding that the Atlantic market is, yes, it's a year-round economy, but it also has a heavy seasonal component. It is at the kind of darkest days of the year for us, and we were probably starting in 50 and 60% occupancy ranges. So when all travel from Upper Canada, air flights, everything got shut down, it quickly became evident it wasn't going to be feasible to try and leave those properties open. The ones we do have open, certainly single digits. At this point, it's more of providing service to the community and a few of our key corporate clients who have asked us for some lodging capacity. So from that point, we've been using our time to keep engaged with our staff and start building our plans for what we're going to do when somebody hits the green button, and also keeping that level of engagement with our guests. We are there for them, and as Bertrand mentioned, we've Certainly formed relationships with all the major nursing home providers and folks that may or may not need our services at some point in the future. And, you know, I think worth noting, if you're not following the national stats, the East Coast has been relatively spared, and I use the word relatively. There's only 3 active cases in PEI today. There have been no hospitalizations, no deaths. New Brunswick, 60 cases, no deaths. Nova Scotia is, you know, I guess up into the 500, 600, 700 range, and there have been 2 deaths of folks with pre-existing conditions. Certainly not a lot of commerce going on these days, so we sit by like the rest of us, waiting to see what comes next.
Thank you very much, Jeff. That's a great overview, and we'll definitely gonna dig into some of those comments you made on what you're looking at for moving forward for strategy. So yeah, I'd like to move to Susie now if we can. Susie, you've been such a strong voice for the industry in assisting the government and getting these programs sort of drafted, quickly implemented, and ultimately money out the door. So if you could now share an update from your perspective on HAC's involvement right now.
Sure. So being one of the first hit industries and certainly a leading indicator of things to come, we were the first at the table with government, very early days, sounding the alarm bells that we were about to hit an iceberg. Since those early days, we've been working in close partnership with the highest levels of government, including the Prime Minister's office, Minister Joly, Minister Morneau. I've had direct conversations with Minister Joly on several occasions throughout this process. We created a COVID response team, which is a subcommittee of our board, and we have been intimately engaged with our owner community in the formulation of our key asks to government. Those I can put into 3 key areas of focus. The first is around employment. So making sure that our employees are taken care of and supported during this period. Certainly the industry, you know, was heavy-hearted in those early days and want to be able to bring those people back at the end of this and make sure that they can pay their bills. Liquidity is the second one. So making sure that our owners can pay their bills in the interim, recognizing that there is very little revenue coming in the door during this period and none in the case of a hotel that might be closed. So making sure that they can pay their bills, but also that they have relief as part of our advocacy work. And then the third is recovery. So we're looking for a stimulus package from the government to ensure that we can swiftly and rebound strongly out of this pandemic. We have had considerable success on a number of our key asks. In fact, all of the government programs have been directly in line with our key asks, some ideas taken right off the page of our proposals. The biggest win for our sector to date is probably the wage subsidy program, GST and mortgage deferrals, the 40%, rather the $40,000 loan for some of our smaller members. And we just saw some extensions of that program today that I'll be happy to provide later on, and some liquidity options, sizable liquidity options that will be available through BDC and EDC via the 6 big banks. Those haven't hit the street yet, but they've been announced. But I would say that the biggest policy gap right now, and really our immediate focus, is on the liquidity measures and getting some strict definitions around the terms. For example, we believe that our sector should have priority access to those funds when they get released. We believe there should be a fine-tuning of the eligibility criteria so that a hotel entity can apply for, or rather an individual property can apply for the $6.25 million per property as opposed to per entity, because if you had to spread that loan across them, it wouldn't be enough. We're also looking for forgivable portions of these loans. We're looking for the government to back these loans by 100% guarantee instead of the 80% that is being made available so far. And we're also looking at other liquidity options like advancing income tax refunds and allowing us to file the year end now. So we're in the fight. We will certainly not rest until we're done getting as much support for this sector as humanly possible. And it's been a very intense exercise, shall we say.
Well, thank you very much, Susie. That was very informative to those that are listening. We thank you again for all your hard work and efforts as well. We'll now jump into some Q&A. Robin will also be monitoring the live chat, so please submit your questions and we'll try to get through some of the remainder of the other session itself. Okay, so first question, panelists. Once the travel bans and social distancing protocols have been lifted, what are your marketing and operational strategies, and have they shifted based on what you are predicting the recovery will look like? Ryan, what's your take?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. This is a bit segmented, probably depending on our properties. So I'll talk about the limited service properties, you know, and in our more secondary, tertiary markets. Our view there has always been to have great relationships with our customers. There's a lot of oil and gas companies there. There's a lot of large infrastructure projects, you know, large pipelines being built out to the West Coast now to support the LNG projects out there. There's a large hydroelectricity dam being built in Fort St. John. So, you know, those types of projects I think will be helpful. And, you know, I'm hopeful that coming out of COVID, that, you know, the federal government really pushes to a large infrastructure spending throughout the country. And that would be a great boost for, you know, many hoteliers. So we'll keep close to those people. I would say one little silver lining has been that a lot of people are wanting to get out of workforce housing, out of camps, you know, that support some of these infrastructure projects. And while those were a bit of a detriment to the business early stage, now we're starting to see green shoots of business come back into hotels, because camps inherently are just large group gatherings, so more difficult to contain and do the social distancing. So the way we treat that, we've been huge supporters of all of our local markets. We donate a lot of money to different, you know, charities, sporting events, and we typically see that come back. I'm a big believer that people in the markets are going to really value humanity through this crisis, and we have strong core values in our organization. We plan to continue to live those, and you know, count on being having that paid forward at some point in the future. For our resort properties, I would say our marketing and staffing strategies probably affected more so. You know, we'll focus a lot more locally, less so even nationally or internationally. It's going to be a very difficult summer for that. And the way we staff up those properties will be dramatically changed. You know, at our resort in Kananaskis, we've revoked all of our summer job offers that would have been out. We'd be planning for the busy summer season. We want to put our people back to work, and we may have to do that in a creative way, but we have many great people that work in the organization that have had to be laid off. We'd like to put them back to work first, but some of the ways that may be unique in that is anybody that has a group hotel or you know, you're really not going to have a catering department and many wonderful people that work in that department. So reinventing food and beverage as sort of one large department is something we're working on now. How do we utilize all the staff throughout the offerings we have? So we're looking at all those things now, but I think, you know, this is really going to change our business and probably everyone on the phone's business, you know, for the foreseeable future. We're all going to have to learn how to do things differently.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. That's very admirable. Bertrand, what are your thoughts?
Well, in the East market, I don't think we have a lot of more market than that we had before. So we have to implement and look after what we had. I think the tourist is going to come back to an extent. I just read an article before this panel that US is looking to open the border soon. I don't know if Canada will follow, but that's good news for our tourist industry. I do believe that people forget, and once the first wave and the everything's going to settle down, I do believe that the U.S. market will come back in Quebec. I don't think they're going to fly as much as they're going to drive. So I think that's still a very good market for us. Our business travelers are very loyal. They're going to have to travel anyway. But it all depends on what kind of security, what kind of comfort we give them once they come into our hotel. What's important is that we establish about 15 things to do, including the government hygiene process when they come into the hotel, and they have to follow it, and our employees have to follow it in order to bring that confidence that they're protected inside our hotel. So these are the main thing here. I don't think there's a lot of market beside one niche that we're looking at right now in Montreal. especially there is a very, very low vacancy rate in the residential market. So we're looking into extended stay, or if you can, specials for 30 days to establish at least a base in our hotel occupancy. So we're looking at that market, and we're seeing some results right now. And this would include also meals, and we have special rates for with meals and with other amenities. So this is mainly what we're looking for. And I think to bring back that market in, we need really, really to establish confidence towards our guests and especially our employees who are going to work at our hotels and are going to feel protected and secure.
Yeah, absolutely. Good strategy. Mandy, Jeff, you want to chime in?
I think, Mark, your question, even on a normal day, is multifaceted. You know, what are you going to do? How are you going to change under this environment? It changes by the day, by the week. But I think in the East, if we focus on what we know to be true now, we have 1,400 rooms in the market. This market's primarily going to respond like a resort market, given the seasonality of the summer season. I think the most optimistic amongst us now has got their date pushed to May 15th to even attempt to start. It's going to be very gradual. It's going to have social distancing. I was involved in a call this morning with various levels of government, and you know, they're even talking about opening up within the provinces, one province at a time. There's certainly some concern with neighboring Quebec, and again, as I alluded to earlier, when you have no cases or very few cases, you can, you know, it's counterintuitive to say, you know, let's open it up and be the case study. The other side of that is, let's not punish our good works that we've done to keep our cases low. So how are we going to have a summer season when Canadian markets or US or international travelers either aren't going to have the confidence to come or they won't physically be able to enter? So I think that takes our efforts to what can we do first within our province? Will we rescue something? What do you do if you have a golf resort, or you're focused on beach business or the wedding business or whatever it may be? And when we're talking about small groups of under 10, no big functions, no events, festivals, all of those things that summer in Canada in general looks like, it becomes pretty granular. And what can you do? What can you develop in your own market? And given the state of fluidity with what's going on with laws and health issues, I'm saying it's really a day by day with a focus on what's in our backyard. What's going to come with that as well is, what are we going to be able to achieve in rate? And as we experience in any peak demand period, that rate is combined with occupancy is critically important. And this year, I think, given the fact we know one is not going to be there and the other will likely not follow as well.
Mm-hmm. Mandy?
Yeah, our strategy is quite different. What we have been focusing on is right here, right now, and how we can wrap our arms around the healthcare workers, all the frontline workers, and really working on keeping them safe. So these people, they don't want to pay rent twice. So they don't want to bring the virus home to their families, but they also don't want to pay for a hotel room. So what we've been doing is we partnered with the United Way, and we've been raising money in order to house these frontline workers. And in addition to that, we're also involved in our communities so that our communities can share their support and their care for these workers. And so we work with schools so that we can get elementary school students to write thank you letters to the nurses, to even the grocery store clerks who are out there. And we put those on their doors so that when they walk in, they're seeing the love. But not only that, a lot of our other partners have stepped up. So for instance, our restaurant in Victoria, they provide one free meal for any healthcare worker who is staying at our hotel. So that's lovely. But we're also getting lots of donations just from the public, whereby people just want to express gratitude to these people. So, you know, over Easter, we got lots of chocolate given to them. And so this is just, it's a different strategy, because what's happened is that Accent Inns is seen as a real leader in taking care of these people. And so we're getting a lot of comments on our social media where people are saying to us, you know what, Accent Inns is going to be my first choice when we're all allowed to travel again.
That's great. And we need that positive energy in the environment this day and age, for sure. Now, a second part of this question is there's a lot of discussion on a potential paradigm shift regarding conferences. With all these new uses of digital platforms and communication channels, are we replacing conferences and business meetings? Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Well, there's no doubt. I don't think we'll throw in the towel on that. Like Bertrand said earlier, people do forget, things pass, and what's the darkest memory of your life becomes a distant one, in, you know, not too far down the road. However, you know, my concern is more on not the convention business and the way that people are interacting with each other. It's the broader economy, and we don't know what that's going to be. Are people going to have money to spend? Where are they going to spend it? So again, it's going to be that multi-pronged. It's going to be a little bit of getting touched by many categories, and you know, it's going to be an uphill climb for us, but we've been there before. We'll do it again, and this is an area where Susie and her group, and I've seen some of the information they've been putting out over the last few weeks, how quickly we get on it at a government level, subsidies for these events to happen. And you know, a month ago, which seems like a year ago, we were talking, oh, the meeting in April's being moved to June, and June conference is going to be the September conference. September might even be optimistic now, but whenever we do get there, the velocity and the amount of capital and effort that are spent by the governing bodies to, for example, subsidize the cost of the meeting space. Block rooms will, you know, can perhaps be subsidized by industry or government or whatever that's going to look like. So, you know, you fall off the horse, you get back on as quickly as you can, or you forget to ride. And I think that's going to be key in the convention piece, that as soon as the coast is clear, it's going to have to be a well-coordinated event by all of the levels. And I don't see that as one that changes. People like to press the flesh. They like to meet. It's in our DNA. We're in the hospitality business. Yeah, some of us are learning to communicate in this method that we're doing it now, but I don't think it's the preferred method for any of us.
Thanks, Jeff. Ryan, Kananaskis is a place where, again, it's not only social leisure, but it's also a lot of corporate for the Calgarians to head to. And we've been to, it's a beautiful place and a great place to have a conference. What are your views?
Yeah, I think, you know, the short and midterm effects to me are definite. I agree with Jeff, the time frame. When we started to look at this, we sort of looked at it as though, you know, we have to shut down our business for 2 months, and then we're going to reopen. You know, we'll take a month to ramp up, and then, you know, things will sort of be normal in the back half of the year. And, you know, I would say at times we're even optimistic to say a lot of stuff has just been pushed to the back of the year. But it's going to be busier in the back of the year. And I would say my view on that is changing, you know, daily, that this is going to be a longer, slower ramp up. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if there's no significant, you know, group gatherings in 2020. It's hard for me to sit here today and think about a sporting event in September, how anyone can do that. And it's a sort of cascading effect. You know, in Alberta right now, they're not opening golf courses. So if you can't golf, what can you do, right? So I think we have a lot to sort out, and that's going to hurt us for sure in the short term. In terms of Kananaskis, we definitely depend on, you know, group a lot there, as any resort would. But, you know, we'll focus on really the local market in Edmonton and Calgary. It's been a big part of the market there. There is no town per se of Kananaskis. There's a lot of nature to distance yourself in. We have the Nordic Spa facility there. You know, spas are actually great places, or I would say less transferable places. You know, they're hot, the virus doesn't survive in water. So I think as people get more educated about these things, they're going to understand the types of places they can go. And I think on a relative basis, we stack up well there. Long term, I totally agree with Jeff. I feel the desire for human connection will be greater than ever. And people may pick and choose more so now which events they want to go to. But people are really going to want to go to events. They're really going to want to connect with people. Even just being a part of this panel, I've missed Chick for the last couple of years. Didn't think much of it. I have young kids at home, and now I'm thinking, oh, I can't wait till I can actually get back to one of these events and see everyone. So I feel generally people will feel the same.
I agree with you. Nothing beats it.
Sorry, Mark, I'll just jump into for Susie here, because there seems to be quite a few questions on just if you can comment on any additional relief that you're going to see out there for the sector from the federal government. Is there anything you can comment on that? There seems to be comments on the ramp up, which these guys have all touched on in terms of how long the recovery will be. So do you have any intel you can share with us? Oh, sorry, just
Here we are. Hi. Yes, for sure. I do think there's going to be more for the sector. Both Trudeau and Morneau consistently reference our sector in their press conferences. They've signaled that there's going to be additional support for those who have been hardest hit, and that's precisely what we've been pushing for. I do think there's going to be more on the wage subsidy program. For the information of the viewers today, we are recommending that program be pushed until hoteliers reach 70% of their occupancy levels of where they were prior to COVID. So that should take people easily 3 to 6 months down the line. We are asking for that extension specifically for our sector. So so that's what we're pushing for on that front. You know, I think there's two big barriers here. One is that the government is partial to supporting small business, and there is a perception of our industry that we are big business, you know, big American chains. And both the government and the general public don't actually realize that there's owners behind these hotels. Many of them are small. In fact, 60% of our industry is independently owned. 87% of our industry would actually qualify for the government's definition of small and medium-sized businesses. Our larger members are the largest employers, and that's precisely who the government is trying to protect. So we've had a significant media strategy around that. Probably many of the people on this call have participated in that. Because it's been very important for us to frame and reshape the understanding of who this industry actually is. And the other big piece is the vulnerability aspect. So this does resonate with the government. That's how we were able to push the wage subsidy, which was originally announced at 10%, but also just for small businesses. And we were able to push that up to 75% and have a qualifier of 30% revenue reductions. And so that covers our entire sector. And in our view, that was one of the smartest policies that the government put in place. And that's precisely the same kind of thinking that we are going to be asking the government to port into other programs like the liquidity measures that they've announced. I also do think we will get a stimulus package. I don't know what that looks like. We're not there yet. You know, our biggest focus in these immediate days, in the next 5 to 7 days on this, is to keep our hotels alive and afloat and solvent, and make sure that they can reopen at the end of the day, because there is no recovery if that doesn't happen.
Oh, Mark, you're on mute there.
It's been said that the impact to hotel fundamentals could last longer than the impact to the overall economy. Do you believe that statement? Mandy, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I think that like even when the crisis is over, I think that the hotel industry is going to suffer longer. I have talked to a number of hotel owners out there who are actively thinking about repurposing their hotel into condos, into seniors facilities. And the reason is that we're going to have a major recession following this. And we all know what that looks like to our RevPAR. So, you know, we're going to be deferring all these payments But really, are we going to have the revenue to pay our deferred payments next year? That's one of my questions. I also think that there will be a decrease in business travel. I agree that there's going to be a pent-up demand, but that in the end, you know, if you look at PricewaterhouseCoopers or Deloitte, are those consultants going to be traveling the same as they did in 2019? I don't think that they are. I think that there's also a risk of future pandemics. You know, this one it definitely caught us off guard, and I don't think the world will be caught off guard again. But that being said, we still are at risk for future pandemics. So I must admit, I'm not as optimistic as I used to be.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Part of that is the ability of groups, or its onus is on owners as well, though, to make sure they're holding rate, because when you look at past downturns, when you've seen people just fight for the little demand that's there, and they're dropping rates, and as we know, the ADR takes so much longer to recover. So does anyone else have a comment on that? Do you think if we can get through this better than past downturns, is it our ability to drive rate and go after different demand segments? Or
Robin, I'll jump in on that one quickly. I'm slightly more optimistic. We've seen dark days before, and things have happened. We're in the middle of this right now. We can't think past it. There's a few things that I think we have to keep our focus on. One, there will be stimulus/relief programs for our industry. As Susie said earlier in the week, things that would take a year or 2.5 years are being done literally in an afternoon, debated on, and they become policy the next day. We're looking at our politicians and our leaders, and we're saying, hey, give us an answer, but they're having this conversation with 100 other people equally as important, if more important at the same time. I think we're all going to feel a lot better when we see the various relief programs that come out. Is it property taxes? Is it provincial programs? Is it federal programs? I'm not going to preempt anything at this point or let on that I know something that someone else doesn't, but I know there's a lot of chatter going on in the background. They're asking the right questions. The relief will come. And if we're not worrying about interest cost, when we're deferring our principal payments 20 years down the road, we're getting relief on our property taxes, the wage subsidy continues in certain industries for an extended period of time, the recovery will be there. I remember 2009 like it was yesterday. No one was ever going to build the house again. No one was ever going to build the hotel again. There weren't going to be any lenders. And within 2, 3, 4 years, that all came back to where it was. And just 60 days ago, we were hitting new highs. So it's going to be a battle. It's not 3 months. It's not 6 months. 2020 is already in the bag, and it's going to be pennies on the dollar in revenue. But we're going to use our time and our efforts to be ready for 2021. That will be part of the recovery. That will be the first wave of the recovery in earnest. And by 2022, you know, we're going to be back up to levels 75, 80, 90% of where we were in 2019. So it's multi-year, it's not multi-quarter, but I don't think any of us need to be converting hotels to other uses or worrying that our industry is going to die. It's going through a rough period. We're going to be some of the hardest hit, but this too shall pass.
Thanks, Jeff. And Bertrand is agreeing, and I think maybe we want to say a few words as well to concur.
Well, you know what? I so much agree with you, Jeff, and I will tell you something else. The world is on the vaccine. The world, the best known biologists, doctor, medical are on the vaccine, are on medication. If tomorrow I would tell you we have the vaccine, let's get vaccinated, I bet you in 2 months, everything is back to normal. So it's not going to happen. We know 6 to 12, 18 months, maybe a vaccine. So that brings us to 2021. 2021, we'll get the vaccine. Everybody's going to come back and forget because they're just concerned right now of getting sick. So for now, for the rest of the year, we're going to struggle. We're going to do whatever the government tells us to do and what we think is right for our hotel. But afterward, in 2021, we're going to start building up again and going back 2022 where we were. I have really good confidence. The market is strong, especially in our field. I mean, we also do condo project, apartment building, and tell you the truth, we've been selling condos during that pandemic. The market is still there. a bit slower, but it's still there. So we do sell condo, we do rent apartment, and I mean, we're getting there. And the good part, as you said, Jeff, the interest rates are low. So that gives us a real chance with the subsidy from the government. We should get along, we should get through this the best as we can, but we should get through this easily.
Since we've heard, thank you, Bertrand. We've heard from three. I think it'd be interesting to get Ryan's view as well, because there are a lot of questions coming in about when do we expect the hotel industry to be back to normalized occupancy ADR. I know that's a hard question to answer, but in terms of, do you want to just jump in on that question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Robin. Yeah, for me, I would echo generally, you know, Jeff and Bertrand's sentiment. You know, I think it's going to be long and deep. We have been through a few challenging economic times, and for those people in Alberta that have had businesses in Alberta in the last 5 years, I mean, it's been no joke. It is very, very challenging. The rest of the country, I am often amazed how little people understand about it still, but it was devastating from, you know, year-end 2014, 24 months following, our EBITDA organization-wide dropped by 2/3. You know, so we went through a dramatic period just recently, but, you know, here I am sitting here. 60 days ago, our company was probably in the best shape it's ever been in. You know, we had more liquidity, we had more rooms, we had better properties, we had lower leveraged. We just fought and clawed our way back through. And so I think, you know, as I got introduced to a book just last week, it's called Managing Transitions, and written by a guy named William Bridges. And he has a concept in the book, for every beginning, there has to be an ending, and for every ending, there has to be a beginning. And it just talks about how you manage transition and how you manage change. And that has sort of really stuck with me. And I've been thinking about that a lot in the last week or so. And I think it's, you know, the people that approach this circumstance in that way, you know, are going to be successful. If you're waiting to get out of the woods by Christmas, you know, you're probably not going to make it. You know, you sort of have to be prepared to be in a very difficult situation for years. The thing about our industry is our leases are nightly. So that's a double-edged sword. In times like these, it's very, very bad because things just fall off a cliff quickly. But we've seen in many of our properties and many of our markets, when that paradigm shifts, it compounds very quickly because our ability to change our revenues compounds very quickly. The momentum in the business compounds very quickly. So I don't know if that's going to happen in 2021 or 2022, but you know, if you stay focused, you accept your current realities, you don't get too in love with the system or process you've built, you know, and you're able to dismiss that and say, next quarter, I need a new system and new process to survive my new reality. You'll be ready when things turn around. And the margin compression when things start to turn is a really, really powerful thing. You know, I think everyone that's been through a downturn in our industry could attest to the fact when you're coming out of it and you have your first good couple quarters, you think, wow, I can't believe the margin's this good. I've never had margins like this because, you know, you're so used to operating in such a difficult environment. When the revenue starts to support the business, you know, it really helps you the other way. So, you know, if I had to put a guess, I think we will see some recovery into 2021. I think 2020 is going to be very difficult. And I don't think we'll see any sort of normalcy really till, you know, 2022 on a sort of global national travel scale. It's hard to imagine people wanting to stuff themselves in planes, you know, anytime soon. So I agree with Bertrand. Depending on where you are, that doesn't mean it's going to affect tourism really, really bad. But I think that's very location specific, you know, how people can access your markets.
So on Susie, there's some questions coming in here on access to these programs. And I guess number one is really, there's a lot of small owners on the line here who are asking, there's live programs available, but can you just touch on those briefly? And then secondly, sort of how do you keep track of it all? Because there's so many announcements coming out. Do you have any advice for folks on how they can, I know Ryan said he's got a guy on the ground that's sort of researching this, dedicated to that. So it'd be great if you could share with the the viewers?
Sure. Yes, there is a lot available for our small hoteliers right now. I'll just bang through it quickly. Wage subsidy, 10%. That came out early. That's accessible. It's available right now. It is going up to 75%. Our hoteliers should qualify for that. The timing on that is 3 to 6 weeks. When it was announced, that was 2 weeks ago. So, you know, we're looking at, you know, early as 10 days from now to up to, you know, 3 to 4 weeks. But I have inside word that they are really trying to under promise and over deliver on that particular piece. So it could be sooner than we think. The CEBA, so the small business loan, the $40,000 with $10,000 forgivable, that's out on the street. And today the Prime Minister announced an extension to that program. So if you had revenues between 20,000 and 1.5 million in payroll last year, you can qualify for that. So that's an additional $500,000 raise from where it was just yesterday. And you can apply for that, you know, after you get off this call. It's out there and it's running. But if that's not enough, there are programs that are going to be rolled out soon, up to $6.25 million, you know, per entity. And that is, there's thresholds for that you can look in the government site and see where you would fit into that. If you have one single hotel, it's 3 million and change. That will be rolled out soon, and that's rolled out through the banks with the support of BDC and EDC. Mortgages have been deferred by 6 months. GST has been deferred. Our smaller members should have no trouble accessing these programs because they are designed for them, in fact, and I think there will be a lot more. And we're certainly pushing for more relief as well on top of what's been announced. In terms of keeping track of this, yeah, this is a challenge for sure, but we can help. So we have a team of experts and analysts that are literally glued to the TV watching every one of these announcements. We are dialed in at the highest levels and also the intermediate levels, right down to the folks that are actually designing these policies. We can get answers quickly. We can influence these policies. And when they come out the door, they get immediately analyzed and they get out into your inbox. We have developed a hotelier's guide to how to access these programs. It is live, it's on our site, it's updated every day. Whenever there's something new that impacts you, you can go and download that, and it is designed specifically for the hotelier. And we are holding a webinar series every week. We have one tomorrow. I'll just put in a plug for that one. It's specifically on the employment measures that have been announced, how those programs all interact with each other, and how they interact, more importantly, with the employment law, because there are some intersections there that need to be unpacked and some key questions that we need to have answers. So we have an employment lawyer on that call, and that's open. You can still register for it. But I think the best news of all is that we've extended our membership to anybody who wants to join us at this point. You're not going to be getting an invoice. You can go on our website, hotelassociation.ca. You can click on, there's a button there. I've been promised by my team, it's there. And we just created it that you can click and you can have access to all this information, including, you know, myself, our team. You know, now is not the time to be worried about who's a member, who's not a member. There's information there, and we want to support you as best we can.
That's great, Susie. Susie, a quick question. How do the programs announced in Canada so far stack up against the rest of the world?
So they're pretty comparable. I mean, to most G7 countries so far, except that we're a couple of weeks behind sort of the impact. So it's hard to do a direct comparison, but I can touch on the Canada-US. That seems to be what's most of interest to our members, and there are a couple of interesting notes on what's been announced there and what's been announced in Canada. So their advocacy focuses in the same areas, so employment and also liquidity. On the employment side, the investment from government also equals 75%. So very comparable in terms of the actual dollar amount, but the systems are absolutely different for how they roll these out. And ours is actually better on the wage subsidy side of the equation. First, because it gives us flexibility. So you can decide to hire back a portion of your employees, let's say 30%, and you'd still get the full 75% for all of those 30% of your employees. Whereas in the US, if you only hire back 30%, the 75% is actually pulled down proportionally to that 30% because they really want to encourage people to hire back everyone. In fact, when it first came out in the US, it was you don't get it unless you hire your full, all your employees back, which certainly doesn't give hoteliers the kind of flexibilities that they would need. The other thing about the US program is that it's available to anybody, which is good if you want to get the money out the door. If you're a small business, you qualify, you go on, you get the money right away. But they've also run out of money now because they've made it accessible to everybody. So they have to go back and pass another bill to get more money into that program if they want to continue rolling it out. Whereas in Canada, they've applied a 30% qualifier. So you need to have had a 30% reduction, now it's 15 even, of revenues in order to qualify. So in theory, our money should go a lot further and it should go to the people who need it more, and that would, and our entire industry would qualify for that. Where they owe performance right now is on the loan piece. First, because they have a program and it's already out the door. They were lucky that they had a program already in existence that they were able to roll out. And in Canada, we didn't have the same small business payroll program, so we've had to build ours from scratch. That's what's taking so long, and that's why we're behind. But on top of that, they also have forgivable portions of that loan. The 75% is for the wage subsidy. There's another 25% that's available for other fixed costs. We are porting that into our own, and we are pushing for that exact replica in Canada. But the other thing that we're including that the US doesn't have is property taxes. So we are including that as in our ask for the government to include a portion of those loans to be forgivable for property tax, as well as mortgage and other fixed costs.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Robin, I think we have a time, a couple minutes for some audience questions. I see the screen is lighting up.
Oh yes, and I apologize because with 2 minutes left, it's going to be hard to get through all this, but I can assure you this panel has committed to, and Susie in particular, and making sure that we follow up, because I'm seeing about 60 questions here. So I am mindful of time. I think we will have to wrap it up now, but I will assure you we will go through this log, and your names are attached to these questions. So we're going to, as a group, following this call, make sure we can reach out individually. Mandy, there's some questions here for you on BC, so we'll get you those to answer. But I think we do have to conclude now. But I just really want to thank everyone for taking the time to participate today. It's very valuable for the audience listening. You know, clearly managing the current health crisis is the first priority, but I think owners and operators are trying to look for ways that they can prepare for next steps. So yeah, and I think everyone should log into Susie's webinar tomorrow. It sounds great, and we'll keep you posted on our next webinar as well. But in the meantime, please stay safe and healthy, and yeah, thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.